y'all, it's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man coming to you here on the old YouTube. Just chilling out, relaxing, taking the night off, Let the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, let them handle my villains for a change. Let them deal with the likes of Doc Ock and Venom and all those crazy maniacs out there. Me? I'm just gonna relax, take it, relax and all cool, not do anything. Well, I mean, I guess I'm gonna be doing this channel. And why am I trying to act all cool to you guys? I mean, I just gotta be myself, right? I mean, I am Spider-Man after all. I can do whatever a spider can. I spin a web any size, catch thieves just like flies. They better look out, because here comes Spider-Man. Well, not tonight. Anyway, been seeing a whole lot of YouTube videos about me, and as much as I love all of that public opinion, and as much as I support that and appreciate all the great videos that are out there, I thought, maybe it's time I get in on this. But I'm so used to newspapers. Digital age is kind of not my thing. I mean, I am turning 60 anyway, But so I had this guy, what's his name? I want to make sure I get it right. Yeah, this guy named Peter reached out to me, some email thing, and he goes, "Hey, I'm going to rank your animated shows. Would you mind coming on doing the intro and the outro for me?" I said, "Sure, no problem. By the way, how much does it pay?" And he's like, "You get good publicity." And I went, "Okay, great. I guess I'll take it. Good publicity is better than bad publicity." Anyway, so let me make sure I get all these right. Okay, yeah. So he wanted me to inform you that this is the ranking of my 10 animated TV shows. Which, by the way, do you think I get any residual from that? You think I get anything from that? I mean, come on, where's my cut and the money? I mean, focus, Spidey, focus. If you can't tell, I have a hard time focusing. Anyway, he's going to be ranking all 10 series. And like he said, since it is my 60th, he thought this would be a good time to do it. And there is a new one coming out on Disney Plus in a year or two. So what better time to get focused on all of them but now? So this is part one. Okay, part 1 of 3, where the third video, this one, so part 1 is going to do 10 through 6, 10 to 6. Then part 2 is going to do 5 through 2, and then part 3 is just going to do number 1, because number 1 deserves the most, and he won't be able to quit talking about whichever one is number 1. I mean, I don't know what it is. But he also wanted me to make sure that I included how he went about this. So he looked at it through nostalgia eyes, because let's be honest, that's a really hard thing to break. Then he tried to look at it legitimately. Like, okay, what actually is good and what is actually bad? Then put those two things together. And then also looked at, okay, which ones does he actually want to see? Between this one and this one, which one would he watch? He looked at the animation styles, the stories, who they were made for, all that stuff. And this is just his opinion. Wanted me to make sure you knew it's just his opinion. It's not right or wrong. So if you disagree, mention down in the comments. Anyway, this is, as I can see here, it is the year of the spider, that's me, and the street rat, whatever, here on Fandom University. So enjoy part 1 of ranking of all 10 Spider-Man animated TV shows. And as I'm known for saying, here's web in your eyes. Well, that's kind of anticlimactic and lousy timing. Peter, I guess you should just cut to black right about now.
One jump ahead of the breadline, one swing ahead of the sword. I steal only what I can afford. That's everything. One jump ahead of the lawman. That's all, and that's no joke. These guys don't appreciate I'm broke.
Riff raff, straight rat, scoundrel.
just a little snack, guys.
Thanks, Spidey. I really appreciate you doing the intro, and we will see you at the end of this ranking. So, there was one thing among all that chatter that he did forget to say, and that is that I did actually watch all these shows the whole way through. Because I do believe that you can't just watch part of something to get the full experience or to really rank a show. I wanted to do these shows and Spidey justice. So I did watch to the end, at least to what was available at that time for the current run of Spider-Man for the show that is now on Disney Plus. And no, it's not the one that, as of this recording, they talked about at San Diego Comic-Con. So, with that being said, let's get into it with number 10, which is Spidey and His Amazing Friends, the current one that is running on Disney Plus. This show is just bad. It's just bad. But before I get into why it's at the bottom, let's talk about the pros, because I do believe all shows have something good in them regardless. And this show, what it's got going for it is the song. The opening theme song is very catchy. It gets stuck in your head. It's memorable. And it's actually pretty upbeat, pretty entertaining, exactly what I would normally expect from a Spider-Man intro. Now, granted, there are some that don't have music lyric-wise to them, and they're just instrumental. Some barely have that. So this, I'm really happy that it has an actual intro, and the lyrics are just a bonus for it, and it works for the show and the character. Next is the costume designs. They're pretty solid. They bring out each character. Spider-Gwen, I'm sorry, I'm not calling her Ghost Spider. Looks like the comic books, but different design, animation-wise. Spidey looks the same. Miles looks the same. I think he has a little different in like his red or black, but that's to be expected. I mean, Into the Spider-Verse did the same thing. So they stick pretty well to what's in the comic books, and I appreciate that. Finally, when it comes to pros, this does help younger viewers get into comic books. It does help them get into Spider-Man as a character and introduces them to the wider world of Spider-Man. In the fact that it does have Miles and Spider-Gwen, where older shows do not, because they weren't created yet. So I will give it to that. And it does start them at a much younger age, so the younger they are, they will enjoy the show. It's made for them with other aspects that I personally do not enjoy, but that's because of how old I am. But it also will get them hopefully interested enough in the character to be like, Daddy, Mommy, what's this character? Or what's, can I see more about this? I really like this. There's got to be more. And then they'll get introduced into the comic books. I will say it also does have some additional characters like Black Panther, Miss Marvel, the Kamala Khan one, and Hulk. So they do have some idea of other heroes within the Marvel Universe, and that's great. But that being said, there's a whole lot about this show that I just do not like, to the point that it has come back with new episodes, and I admit I haven't watched them. I just have no interest in them. I read the synopsis, and it didn't thrill me. Maybe I'll check them out, but I highly doubt it. So, coming in at the bottom of these negatives, the most obvious one is something I just said. Clearly, this show was made for a younger audience. It wasn't made for me, the lifelong fan, or people that are older than me, who started off reading the comics when they first came out. It's not made for us. It's made, again, for 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. It's made for these kids to introduce them to this world, like I said. But still, even with that degree, you gotta know that older fans are gonna check it out. Well, or at least maybe see what it's like, because we'll watch just about anything that's Spider-Man, or anything that's Marvel in general. But if you're a huge Spider-Man fan, you're gonna check it out. So it would be nice if they would include Easter eggs or include aspects from the comics that we could appreciate. And you know, if there's older fans watching it with their younger kids, you gotta put something in there for them to at least give them some enjoyment if they're forced to watch this. I mean, perfect example, Pixar does that really well. That kids will appreciate the movies, but there's stuff in there that adults will appreciate and understand as well. The other thing is, it's just the most popular spiders. I know I said this in my positives, but the thing is, it's only Spider-Man. It's only Spider-Gwen and Miles. It feels like there should be more to it. And maybe this is just the fact that I grew up with the original Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. So to me, I'm thinking, okay, you have Spider-Man and you have some other Marvel characters that aren't spider related. But Spider-Man sells, those characters sell. I guess from a business sense, it makes sense to include them. I do miss that this also feels totally different than the characters we're used to, or different than the comics, period. They're a lot younger, which is to be expected. And they just feel different. They don't have problems, or, real problems that they have to deal with. They have younger kid problems like, gotta save our doggy, or gotta save the cat or pet robot, whatever. And I get, again, kids can relate to this, but it just does not feel like Spider-Man. It just does not feel like this character. Also, the lessons that they have, because, again, age range, you're going to have lessons in this show. They seem so obvious. And I'm sorry. Yeah, they're going to be obvious to me, but I feel like even younger kids are going to be like, oh, okay. So that was the lesson for today. Like, I just feel like they're so obvious. They state them basically like, oh, so I learned that blah, 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 blah. They basically just say it. And I just feel like you could be a little less obvious with it, because people always say kids are smarter than you think they are. Don't underestimate them. Or, like Princess Leia once said, don't underestimate a droid. Do not underestimate children. Also, they come up with different colored webs. Ghost Spider has pink, I think it is. Spidey has white. And I can't even remember what his code name is. His are red, I think. Red or black. Doesn't make sense. I get you want to distinguish characters, but that doesn't make sense to me, and it just is weird, in my opinion. The voices, they also don't work. Again, it could be a style thing that maybe they work for the style of the show, but they just don't work. They do not sound like these characters. I feel like they don't even speak like these characters. Everything is just dumbed down, and I wish they would have thought about that more. And finally, the animation style. It's just way too chunky. It looks like the toys that either were based on this show or that the show was based on. I don't know which came first, because they look like toys. And I'm sorry, that is one of the things that I do look at with these shows, and you'll notice that through the rest of the ranking, is how does the animation look? Animation just looks childish. I'm not saying animation is easy. I'm just saying here, it doesn't work. You could have done a lot better. Clearly, this show was made to sell toys, and it just doesn't work for me. Even though, like I said, I know I'm not the target audience, but regardless, it is a Spider-Man show. So that is why it comes in at number 10. I really hope that Spider-Man freshman year is really good, because the most recent people to do Spider-Man animation and stories, they just don't seem to know how to do it. I mean, I saw some glimpses of it that they did at San Diego Comic-Con, but obviously I'm not there, so I didn't see everything. But the reason I mentioned this is because coming in at number 9, we have Marvel's Spider-Man. Now, starting off with the positives, there were some good character and story moments in the series. It didn't completely suck. It wasn't terrible. It did have its moments, unlike number 10 that honestly just doesn't have any really saving graces for characters or story. And it also touched on more recent story arcs, or ones that were just recently done within the last 10, 15 years, or stories that had never been done before. Like the Superior Spider-Man, and they did a semi-Planet of the Symbiotes story arc in season 3. I mean, I know what they were going for, and I appreciate that they tried, but it just fell apart overall. Also, I liked the changes they made to Hobgoblin in this series. It's like he's the one character that I actually thought the changes were good, and I thought they did well. They went more the Ultimate Hobgoblin route, where it's Harry Osborn who's the Hobgoblin. Now, the look of him is not from the Ultimate comics, but I like how they showed Harry's evolution to become the Hobgoblin, and then his idea of wanting to be a hero, ideas of kind of failing as a hero, being manipulated, and just his eventual rise to becoming a true hero. I really enjoyed that. And I loved the season finales. I thought they were really good. And it wasn't just because I'm like, yes, one more season down, I don't have to watch as much of this anymore. But I thought they were genuinely good. There was just something about them that they actually put the time and the effort, it felt like, into these stories. I especially remember season 2's finale. It was really good. It was heartwarming. It was heartbreaking. It has very watchable and very good moments for the show. I also loved the Easter eggs that they had in this show. They had Easter eggs from the movies. They had Easter eggs from the comics. They even had really deep cut Easter eggs that only diehard fans would see. And my favorite example of this is at the cafe that they go to all the time. It's called Cup of Joe. Now, for those of you who don't know, Cup of Joe was like, I think it was the letters page in the late 90s, early 2000s, where editor-in-chief Joe Quesada would reply to letters, or where he would say things about what's going on, interact with fans. It's kind of like, it was basically Stan Lee's soapbox, where back in the day Stan Lee would interact with the fans. This is where Joe Quesada would interact with the fans. So I thought that was a really cool Easter egg that kept coming back again and again. I also liked how they used lesser known characters in this show, or at least characters also who may have just been developed or just created within the past couple of years when this show came out. For example, there was Max Modell, who in this show was the principal, I think. I can't remember exactly what his position was at Horizon, which ended up being a school, compared to the comics where Horizon is an actual laboratory and Max runs it there. They had Anya, another spider character that got her powers. They introduced her as part of the spider team. And then they also had the Jackal. Not thrilled with how Jackal was handled, but the fact that we got a Jackal, a real Jackal, was kind of cool. Because I cannot remember, and I just watched these shows recently, I don't think there was a Jackal in Ultimate Spider-Man. I'm pretty sure there wasn't. So to see an old character on screen for the first time in animation in full Jackal form, not just his Miles Warren character, because Miles Warren's been in it, but as the Jackal in full form. That was cool. The voice cast also generally works. It's not memorable like later ones or other seasons, but it works for the show. I can take it or I can leave it. It's not one that sticks with me, but it's not one that distracts from the series as well. Now let's go into the bigger part of this show, the negatives. This animation is very forgettable. In my opinion, it's terrible. Though again, not as bad as number 10. It just seems simple. I'm not saying animation is simple, but it just doesn't feel good. It feels like minimal effort. It feels like the simplest form of the characters. There's no depth to it, no depth to the characters or no personality. It just is very lackluster when it comes to that. It feels like another toy. It feels like it was just made to do another type of toy. But like, hey, you like to look at this? There, go out and buy the toy. Also, I really did not like that there was an extreme lack of classic villains. I love classic villains. Give me Rhino, give me Shocker, Mysterio, Doc Ock, Green Goblin, heck, I'll take Sandman, or give me Vulture. Give me these classic characters. I love them because those were the characters, the villains that I grew up with, I admit. But the villains here, they just weren't that good, and they were newer characters that, And the ones that did show up that were classic, I felt like they totally butchered them. Because I'll give you two prime examples here. Kraven the Hunter. Kraven the Hunter is a television hunter. It's like a television personality. Not Kraven. Kraven is a tough, no barge, wild man who can take on any wild animal. He's not a television personality. Doc Ock, he's just too young for me. I think he's supposed to be the same age as Peter in this show. That doesn't work for me. He was, again, just too young. When it came to the overall cast of the show, too many of them were smart. I know Peter Parker is smart. Doc Ock is smart. Yes, Miles is smart as well. And I think most of the rest of the cast in comics generally is pretty smart as well. But that was the focus of the show. It seemed like everything revolved around science and the scientific method and discovery. And that's great. Get kids interested in science. Get them interested in this stuff. But there's more to Spider-Man than just science. And that just bugs me. I wanted more. And I wanted different. So there was, like I said, there was no differentiation between these characters. So I didn't find them really likable to that degree, or I couldn't really relate to them. Aunt May felt way too young. But, I mean, I get it. That's where they're going with the movies. But still, it just didn't feel right for this show. And maybe that was the animation, and maybe it was just what all she was doing. They botched a classic villains team with the Sinister Six. Half of the members have never even been on the Sinister Six. I don't even think half of them exist to a certain degree. I mean, they put Spider-Man on the Sinister Six at one point. He's never been on there as far as I can remember. I don't think he's ever been brainwashed to be a member of that team. So no, it did not work. Venom had no connection really to comic book lore. There were aspects there, but I will just say there was no Eddie Brock to become Venom. At least, not that I can remember. It might have been brief like that. And they stripped the character, the symbiote, down to its very basic level. It's a symbiote. We don't know really much about it. We want to try to use it. Oh, here we're going to give you Planet of the Symbiotes to give other symbiotes. That's it. They kind of combined the ultimate version of Venom with the main 616 version, but even that, they didn't really do it well. I think the biggest problem this series had was that it tried to combine too many versions of Spider-Man and his universe. Whether that was including alternate versions, like mixing the Ultimate Universe with the 616 universe, with the movies, with all these things. They just try too hard to put too much in this show. The stories didn't flow. All these big stories, like Superior Spider-Man was like a 2-year thing, I think. And they cut it down to like 4 or 5 episodes. They chopped up all these big stories that could have been a full season or could at least have been half a season. They cut it down drastically. And that definitely was a big problem for this show. Like I said, it was science-centric, which made me feel like the characters were missing other aspects of their origins, of their personality, just of their comic book persona, and what we as fans fell in love with. I felt like this show wasn't truly made for fans to watch, or especially older fans, because it just felt so cheesy. It felt like an old Saturday morning cartoon that I would have grown up with. Now, here's the thing. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I love many of those old Saturday morning cartoons, and a lot of them are cheesy, and it's really fun. But here, it just doesn't work. There was just something about it that I just couldn't get behind. It didn't work right. It didn't feel right. And because of that, I found myself really not enjoying this show like I hoped I would. So, Marvel Spider-Man comes in at number 9. Coming in at number 8, we have Spider-Man from 1981. Now, right off the bat, the reason I have this above the bottom 2 is because of the animation. Now, I know the animation generally is bad. It doesn't hold up well today compared to other animation styles. But I like it a whole lot more than the bottom 2. And the reason for that is it has that classic feel to it. That classic charm, the nostalgia of it. It just brings a smile to my face generally. And I love the comic accurate looks to the characters. That's just something that means a lot to me. And I mean, yeah, they've changed designs over 60 years. But most of these characters, you know who they are by looking at them. And it might not be the best animation style compared to others today, but at least they got the look right. And if I'm going to watch a show with bad animation, but great looking characters that remind me of the comic books versus one that I'm like, this animation's okay, it might be updated, but it still doesn't work for me, but the stories and the characters just don't work as well, I'm going to go with the classic looking characters and the stories that I feel generally work. When this show also was focused on classic villains, again using that term, like Sandman or Vulture or Doc Ock, I forget who else was in there, but when it focused on these classic characters, it was good. I enjoyed watching it. I looked forward to episodes. And nothing about Spidey really felt off. It didn't feel different. It wasn't like they were so focused on this one aspect of the character, or he was more funny than he was serious. It just felt like Spidey. It felt like the character. It made me remember why I fell in love with comics. Yes, maybe there weren't as many problems, or they weren't as drastic, or there wasn't as much drama as maybe the comics had, or things that have happened recently with the sales going up and up and up, and how much they want to hurt Peter. But it still was there. You had the classic, can he make it on a date with Betty type thing. You had the relationship to school. You had just all these things that I love from the classic stories, from those original Steve Ditko and Stan Lee stories. I love those classics. And this feels like a classic comic book to me. And that's why I love it so much more than the bottom two. Again, it is low on the list, but there are things about it that I really enjoyed. With that, we go to the negatives now. The character voices. First and foremost, they're fine, but they don't stand out. They work for the show, they sound like the characters to a certain degree, but it's just like, okay. There's nothing about it that really, truly stands out. There's also too many characters that don't work in this show. And where I said before, the classic characters work, the ones that we know from the comics, the ones that they introduced here that I feel like they made specifically for the show, they don't. They're just, I'll say it, they're dumb. The ideas are there, but I feel like you could have done it with other characters, because we've had some stories like this before that were better told, like Spider-Man being shrunk down. They created a villain for that role. But I think in Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, the older one, they did that again, but I feel like it was Goblin that did it, or Doc Ock who did it. So you could have had a classic villain do it. Speaking of classic villains, Doctor Doom. Not to say I don't like seeing Doctor Doom, and not to say he hasn't tangled with Spider-Man many, many times. But his part of this show was so painful. It was agony. Because here's the thing. In the show, it was the only storyline, the only plot, the only story arc that kept going through the whole show. Which, if they had done that more often, would have been fine. But they also cut it up. It was like 3 episodes, a Doctor Doom episode, and then maybe another Doctor Doom episode. Another 4 or 5 episodes, oh, here's another Doctor Doom episode. 6 more episodes, here's another Doctor Doom. Another 2, here's the conclusion. I didn't like that. That was what made it jarring. That's what made it just annoying. I'd rather have the story back to back, one thing overall, but add to it. You know, make it about more than just Doctor Doom, or do something with it. I just felt like it didn't match the rest of the show. The rest of the show really had no continuity to it, but these episodes did. It just didn't work for this version. Like I said, I think the big thing about it was it lasted too long, and it was cut up more than it needed to be. The show overall is very meh. I'm not going to say it's terrible, but it's not great either. It's definitely a product of the time. There's enough that if you're a fan of Spider-Man that you'll enjoy, but it's also like, you don't need to watch every episode. You can skip probably at least half the series, I think. I'd watch like the beginning, a couple episodes, and then the end, and you'd be fine. Because everything in the middle is just like, eh. Unless you like Doctor Doom, then watch all the Doctor Doom episodes back to back. And that is why 1981 Spider-Man comes in at number 8. Coming in at number 7 is Spider-Man, the new animated series that was on MTV. Yes, MTV did a Spider-Man show, which is kind of interesting and kind of strange when you think about it, because Spidey has always just kind of been on more family-friendly television. So to see him on MTV was just kind of interesting and strange. But starting with the pros, I did like how Spidey looked. He didn't look bad, especially when he was fighting, when he was wall crawling, or just moving around the city, web swinging. He looked great. And I loved the lighting that they would put on him, the shadows. It was just, it had a noir feel to it a little bit, you know, it was kind of spooky, the sneaky aspect to it. It just felt really neat. Like, it felt good. You know, him sneaking up on villains, or there's danger around these corners, what's going on. It felt more like a dangerous city, a place that would need a hero. And I like that. Neil Patrick Harris works as Spider-Man, but not as Peter Parker. I really liked him voicing Spider-Man. I thought he did a great job and he worked for the character. But you need to be able to embody both versions of the character. You need to embody the hero in Spidey and the everyday character in Peter Parker, because they're the exact same character. And I feel like he didn't do that well. A prime example of somebody who did do this good is Kevin Conroy as Batman. He's great as Bruce, and he's great as Batman. It works together. Neil Patrick Harris, not so much for the Spider-Man character. Now, with the voice cast, the rest of them were okay, I guess. You know, they weren't terrible, but they weren't great either. But I have to point out, I loved what they did with Kingpin. The fact that they brought in the late Michael Clark Duncan to voice their version of Kingpin was great. For those of you who don't know, Michael Clark Duncan played Kingpin in the Ben Affleck Daredevil. So I love that he came back to do this version, and it was just a neat Easter egg as well for fans who knew him from that movie. The episodes move very quickly. You do get through the series really quick. Yes, that's because there's one season, but the episodes move. And even when you're kind of like, okay, this show's okay, and it's not great, you don't have to wait too long to get through the whole show. You don't have to wait too long to get through an episode. It never really feels like, oh, it's dragging on. Is it a half hour already? And that's good. But there's plenty of negatives about it too. I admire what they were trying to do with the animation, with this CG, the animation they were doing. But it just overall does not work. Like I said, with Spidey and his acrobatics and the look to him, that stuff works. But you gotta make every aspect of the show work. It can't just be the action scenes. You've got to be able to make those, I'm talking to my friends, I'm in college, I'm in class. You got to make those scenes work too. And the animation here for it just didn't. And it was actually kind of distracting. I will say though that this animation, again, with Spidey and his look, does have a neat comic book look to it, which is why the shadows and the lighting and all that works. Because another video that I watched when they were talking about this, when the YouTuber was talking about this show, and he showed panels of early 2000 images, it looked like the show. So I'll give him credit for that. But the animation just couldn't blend the whole show together. And that's why it doesn't work as a whole. There was also a 50-50 when it came with villains again. Half of them were classic, like Electro and the Lizard, Kingpin, and half of them were, as far as I was concerned, they were made up. They were based on other characters. According to this other YouTuber again, I think it was just because they couldn't use certain characters based on rights, or maybe they were going to use them in future movies. But they just don't work. Normally, in my experience, characters created for a show don't always work, or they work just in that medium. There are a few exceptions. I love X-23. She was created for X-Men Evolution, and it's great. How popular is Harley Quinn? And she came from Batman the Animated Series. So there are times when it works. But here, it just does not work. Now, there were some characters who had multiple show-ups in the series, but they were mainly two-parters. The one time it did, it was a two-parter, so I'm not counting that. But Electro was the only real multi-episode character. And his story, I can't remember how it aired, but at least on the DVD that I have, they're out of order. So if they're by air date, they aired his story out of order, which doesn't make any sense at all either. This also wants to be in the Raimi universe. And really the only thing that even connects it to the Raimi verse, besides the fact that it came out after the movie, is Harry's hate for Spider-Man over the fact that he thinks he killed his dad. That's it. And it's not like you'll watch this and go, oh, that's Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. That's his character. Those are his embodiments of it. No, they're not. If you didn't know that this came out after that and it was supposed to be a continuation of that, you wouldn't know. But probably the thing that really bugged me, besides the animation, was this whole idea they put in about the newsroom, the media, the actual like television newsroom, not the Daily Bugle. That was in there, but it didn't play a huge part. I just didn't like any time we went to that. That didn't feel right. And the journalist that was supposed to be creating a love triangle between Peter and MJ, I really didn't like her. I thought she just didn't work. If they wanted to do something, what they should have done was make it Felicia or make it Gwen. Yeah, it wouldn't have been that character from the comic books, but it would have made more sense, and I probably would have appreciated it more. And it might have made things work a little bit better, like I said. So, Spider-Man, the new animated series from MTV, comes in at number 7. And coming in at number 6 as the final Spider-Man show we're going to talk about in this video is Ultimate Spider-Man. Now, before I get into any real depth about this show, I do want to say this show is complicated to me to discuss because I got so many mixed feelings on it. It feels like a very mixed show. There's great things about it and there's terrible things about it. It's just a very mixed bag, and it's hard for me to say, well, this is a pro and this is a negative, to the point that I included a mixed category in here. So we'll talk about the pros, then we'll talk about those categories that are mixed. You know, part of it is great, but other parts of it just aren't great. And then we'll talk about the negatives. So starting off with the pros, the best thing about this definitely is the voice cast. The voice cast overall is fantastic. It's great. And I love Drake Bell as Spider-Man in this show. I was surprised. I didn't think I would. But he works for this version of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. He works for this show. He's younger. He has a younger sounding voice to him. He's still in high school, which is different than a lot of the other ones we've seen, or they just do it better here. He's also much more comedic. He has that, and Drake Bell, he just has that comedic tone that he can pull off very well. And Spidey's a very comedic character. But at the same time, he can be serious when he needs to be serious. And there are those moments that he just shines in showing how good of a Spider-Man he can actually be in this show. And it's one that I remember. I'm sure if you watch it, you'll remember his voice too. Again, the comedy of it might also hinder it a little bit, but we'll talk about that in another category. It just, overall, Drake Bell is great, and he works for this show, and he's memorable. Some of the standout moments for me definitely are Across the Spider-Verse, because I just loved seeing characters that we hadn't seen in animation up to that point. Like we saw Spider-Man Noir, we saw Spider-Man 2099, which I love. And we also saw the Guardians of the Galaxy. Those episodes were good. And the finale was fantastic as well. And it wasn't just because I was like, okay, now I can move on. Now I'm done with this show to a certain degree. I thought the finale was just generally good. It was well done. It was well put together. It was a good two-parter. And it worked. It brought everybody's story to conclusion. And it was how a series should have ended. And part of that is also because of Doc Ock. I loved Doc Ock in this show. Now, I will admit, when he first showed up, I'm like, that's not really Doc Ock. Because he was this big, clunky mass of a character. But thinking on it, I like the evolution of him through this show. And it really gives the impression that this is a Doc Ock Spider-Man show. Because it's their fates and their stories that are more intertwined, you realize. As the show progresses, as these characters progress, you realize, oh, they're really the ones that are interconnected here. They're the ones that have the most influence on each other. And what I love about that is the fact that it wasn't focused on the Green Goblin. Because I'm getting tired of the Green Goblin. I love him as a character. He's important to the Spider-Man lore, and he's an important character to Spider-Man overall. But Green Goblin is to Spider-Man what the Joker is to Batman. And I'm getting tired of the Joker, to be honest, also. I want more characters. I want other characters. We don't always need to go back to the same ones. But they did Doc Ock really well here. And even though I didn't like that first design, I like how it evolves. And as he evolves as a character, his costume evolves to the point that we get that more classic looking Doc Ock costume. At least it's classic looking to me, because when I think of Doc Ock, this is the type of suit that I think of with these colors, and that it just stands out in my mind. And I saw it, I'm like, that is Doc Ock. And I love how, as he evolves as a character, his costume evolves as a character. And I really enjoyed that. And like I said, I loved the interactions between him and Peter and realizing this was really their series. But now let's move on to the more mixed aspects of the show. And the biggest one we have here is breaking the fourth wall. I was not a fan of this when I first watched this show. I mean, I didn't even finish it the first time I watched it. I just, that broke up the story for me. It didn't work. I didn't like it. I couldn't get over that. That was a Deadpool thing. It wasn't a Spider-Man thing. However, upon a second viewing, there were still moments that I'm like, that's just dumb. But I started looking at it from a certain point of view, as Obi-Wan would say. If you looked at it from the point of view that these are his thought bubbles, or even that this is the description going on at the top of a comic book page, it worked. I enjoyed it then, and I didn't mind it as much then. Aunt May also is a little bit crazier and more athletic than I would like. Because in my head, Aunt May is an old, fragile lady. I admit it. That's just how I picture her. But I liked her. At first she was annoying, but then as the show progressed, you liked her more and more. And you realized this is the way they were going with Aunt May at the time. Aunt May has gotten younger and younger in the movies. And when people explain why, it makes sense. And that's the way they went, especially with the Tom Holland movies. And Tom Holland is younger than the others. It all works. And I think that's what really helps you get over the fact that Aunt May is a lot more athletic and a lot more out there than you might be used to. I also enjoyed the normal animation style. I thought the normal animation was great. I thought it was really fun, and it worked. There was no problems I had with it. But it was those cut scenes where we did the anime style. That was just distracting. Again, I liked it to a certain degree because I liked when I said, okay, this is just his thought bubbles and we're seeing them. It was okay. But I felt like it was distracting, especially the more they used it. Now we move on to the negatives. Let's start off with the biggest one. This show morphs like halfway through the series. It starts off, it feels like one show with one style, one way of doing things, and then it feels like it just changes to a completely different show. And when that starts is when they change the animation look of the Avengers. Tony and Hawkeye look one way in season 1, I think partway through season 2. But as soon as we got Avengers Assemble as a TV show, they went to that way of the characters looking. Because I guess they wanted to try to interconnect the shows to a certain degree, or keep it consistent. And that's just jarring as well. I mean, you could say, I guess they got a different costume change or whatever, but that was jarring to me. And then you had the first 2 seasons were really about Spidey developing this singular team. And then all of a sudden it's, oh, we're going to create another team that we want you to lead. And it just didn't kind of flow well from one team to the other. It just kind of happened. Symbiote / Venom was also a mixed bag for me. There were great moments that they did with him. But again, there were other times where he just wasn't Venom. That really is, when I really think about it, I'm like, it's not Venom. I'm sorry. It might have worked a little bit for the show, but it wasn't Venom. I did love that they brought in Anti-Venom. That was cool. That they did Carnage was okay, but they screwed up Carnage. That's another thing. They kind of, they didn't do Cletus. And that was the thing. They didn't do Cletus Cassidy. And to me, Carnage doesn't really make sense the way they did it. For him to be crazy, you need Cassidy as far as I'm concerned. It just didn't work as well. But it's like the only reason they did it was to give certain characters powers. Like, that's why MJ becomes a spider in the end, is because she gets a hold of the Carnage symbiote and she becomes the queen and all this stuff. I think you probably saw this stuff, but I do apologize. Maybe I should have said spoiler warning if you actually want to go back and watch the show, but it's a whole ordeal. They brought in Scarlet Spider, and I like that. They brought in the comic version that Kane was, the red and black suit. But again, it was just another one of these characters that I feel like they didn't do justice. It didn't feel right. I just, it felt like it was just another part for Team Spider, and there was so much with Team Spider that I was like, you're just bringing characters. The explanation, the reasons they're there, it's not really working. Though Agent Venom was there, and I did like that. And they botched all these other characters, like Mysterio, for example. One episode, he's in one episode, and it's not even a him; it's his daughter, which is fine. If you introduced Mysterio earlier in the show, it would have made more sense to me. Moon Knight, totally not Moon Knight, especially if you watch the Disney Plus show. Like I mentioned, Carnage to a certain degree. Vulture, yeah, they botched that. Then there was this thing about plots. They dropped certain plot points all of a sudden, it felt like. There was a plot with Loki wanting to get revenge on Spider-Man. It happened, and then there was like 2 episodes where he was trying to do it, and they dropped it. Another one, like I said, was his team. His early team with White Tiger, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and Nova. I felt like that didn't carry through to the end of the show. They were there, but they put more emphasis on it in season 1, and I thought that was going to be a major thing, and it wasn't. Also, the fact that they used the blue Electro, which was fine, but they turned him back to classic Electro, only to have him come back as blue later on. Like, how does that work? Nova's suit was, sometimes it was this one, and sometimes it was this other one. But the final big issue I had with this show was the title of it. And here's why. It's called Ultimate Spider-Man. But the way the show was, it felt like it should have been called Spider-Man, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Spider-Man in the Marvel Universe. Because S.H.I.E.L.D. was in every single episode, pretty much. Or if they weren't, there was another character from the MCU there. I'm sorry, the Marvel Universe, not the cinematic one, just the main comic book universe. There were so many crossovers. It just, I don't see their names in the title. Spider-Man's name is in the title. It's called Ultimate Spider-Man, so it should be focused on him. Now, why other shows I include in this, like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, both versions, is because the shows are still focused on Spider-Man. The other characters are just there, but it's still his show. Here, that just wasn't the part of it. I felt like when I hear Ultimate Spider-Man, it should be all him, with some guest stars. But it wasn't. It was guest stars galore. I'm also not a huge fan of him becoming a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent with all the S.H.I.E.L.D. tech. It's kind of like some people's versions of the Iron Man Junior suit, as I know some people call it, or just the Iron Man suit that he gets in the MCU. It's tech. But here, I really don't like it here. I expected a lot of solos action from him in this show, and I just didn't get that. So, yeah, that was definitely the biggest problem I had with this show. So coming in at number 6 is Ultimate Spider-Man. So, we have covered my ranking from 10 to 6 in this video. Coming in at number 10 was Spidey and His Amazing Friends, the most current one. Coming in at number 9 was Marvel's Spider-Man. Coming in at number 8, we had Spider-Man from 1981. Coming in at number 7, we had MTV's Spider-Man, or the proper name, Spider-Man, the new animated series. And coming in at number 6, we had Ultimate Spider-Man. But now I want to know, what are your bottom shows? What would you put as the bottom tier Spider-Man animated shows? Do you agree with this list? Do you not? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments down below. Or hold off until the end and let me know your full list. But let's discuss. Remember, these are all just my opinions, my thoughts, how I view the shows, and the ones that I really like. Our views don't have to match. They probably won't. Whatever they are, let me know down in the comments below and be nice to each other about this. Because we all like different things about Spider-Man, but we're all Spider-Man fans. So, until part 2 comes out, remember, read what you love, enjoy what you love, and let's all work for a better fandom. I'll see you next time.